"Do you have a mate?" the Alpha King asked. She whispered, "Not yet," and he snapped with jealousy. Shadows stretched across the cobblestone streets, and the wind whispered secrets through the trees that surrounded the tiny settlement. In this forgotten corner of the kingdom, life moved slowly, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for someone to arrive. Alara walked with measured steps along the narrow path that led to the healer's hut. Her hands, slender but calloused from years of tending wounds and brewing herbs, clutched a small bundle of dried flowers and roots. Her dark hair, tied loosely with a strip of leather, swayed with every step. Even in this quiet village, she could feel eyes watching her. Always. She ignored them. She had long learned that curious gazes rarely brought anything but trouble. The healer's hut smelled of earth and medicine. Bottles lined the shelves, filled with powders, tinctures, and strange liquids that shimmered in the dim light. Alara set down her bundle and began preparing a healing poultice for an injured villager. She worked silently, her thoughts wandering to the tales she had heard as a child, stories of wolves that could walk as men, kings who ruled kingdoms hidden in shadow, and curses that lingered like fog over the land. Tales meant to scare children. But sometimes she wondered, what if they were true? Her pondering was interrupted by a sudden sound, a footstep heavy and deliberate on the path outside. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Alara rose slowly, instinctively reaching for the dagger she kept hidden beneath her cloak. The door to the hut creaked open, revealing a figure that seemed to belong more to legend than to the mortal world. He was tall, broader than any man she had seen, with dark eyes that glimmered like polished onyx. His hair fell in thick waves around his face, black as midnight. There was an aura about him, a presence that made the air itself seem heavier. This was Kale, the Alpha King of the Northern Realm, a man whispered about in fearful tones throughout the villages, a ruler whose temper and power were as legendary as the wolves said to roam with him. "Who are you?" Alara asked, her voice steady despite the sudden quickening of her heart. "I am Kale," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "And you, healer of Eldrith, tell me, do you have a mate?" The question startled her. A mate. The word had never meant much to her. She had lived her life alone, caring for the sick and wounded, and had never thought of binding herself to another. Yet, hearing it from him, it felt like a challenge, a ripple of something deeper she could not name. She whispered almost against her will, "Not yet." At her words, something flickered in his eyes, an almost animalistic flash of jealousy, so quick she barely caught it. The air between them seemed to thrum, heavy with tension and unspoken desire. Kale's jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked less like a king and more like the predator the legends warned of. "You must be careful," he said finally, his tone low, dangerous. "The wrong choice could cost you everything." Alara felt her pulse quicken. There was power in him, undeniable and magnetic, but there was also a hint of something tragic lurking beneath the surface, a loneliness that even his strength could not mask. She did not trust him entirely, yet she could not look away. "I am not afraid," she said, though her voice betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "I have lived my life on my own. I will continue to do so." Kale's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Brave words," he said. "Few would dare speak them to me." He stepped closer, the shadows of the forest behind him stretching and curling like dark fingers. Alara's instincts screamed at her to step back, yet she remained rooted to the spot, drawn inexplicably toward him. There was something in the way he looked at her, a hunger not for her body but for her courage, her spirit, her soul. "You do not know the world you live in," Kale murmured, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Darkness grows in every corner, and not all who wander into it return." Alara's heart pounded, yet she refused to show fear. "Then perhaps it is best that I learn it for myself," she replied, her tone steady, though a part of her trembled inside. For a long moment neither spoke. The wind rustled the trees outside, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant snow. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a mournful sound that sent shivers down her spine. Kale's eyes followed the sound, dark and distant, before returning to hers with an intensity that made her knees feel weak. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met," Kale said finally, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "And yet I cannot let you remain untouched by what is coming. You belong to a fate you do not yet understand." Alara frowned, confused and wary. "What do you mean?" Kale shook his head, a shadow passing over his features. "It is not for you to understand yet. Only to survive, only to choose." A sudden rustling in the trees drew their attention. Both turned instinctively. The villagers had been silent witnesses, whispering prayers to gods they barely believed in, and now they fled at the sight of the Alpha King standing in their village. Kale's expression darkened, the faint jealousy she had seen earlier transforming into a sharp edge of protectiveness. "You will not leave this place alone," he said, his voice firm. "Not while I am here." Alara felt a strange warmth in her chest, a mixture of fear and fascination. Who was this man who could command the wind and shadow with a single glance, who could stir feelings she had never known she possessed? And yet, who was he really? The Alpha King, or something far older, something bound by curses and power she could barely comprehend? Before she could answer, Kale turned and disappeared into the forest, his figure swallowed by the dim light of dusk. The air seemed to vibrate with his absence, leaving her alone yet strangely aware of his presence, as if a part of him lingered in the space he had occupied. Alara took a deep breath and forced herself to return to her work. She tried to ignore the pull in her chest, the strange ache that told her that her life, quiet as it had been, had changed forever. That night, as she lay under the thin blanket in her small hut, sleep eluded her. Visions of Kale's dark eyes haunted her, images of shadows, of wolves, of distant mountains under a blood-red moon. She could feel his jealousy, his power, and his strange, magnetic attraction as clearly as if he were standing by her side. And somewhere deep in the forest, Kale lingered, watching the hut. His thoughts were a storm of desire and frustration. She had whispered, "Not yet," and yet that simple denial had stirred a possessiveness in him that frightened even him. The Alpha King, feared by all, could not tame the way his heart, and his soul, reacted to her. "I will claim what fate forbids me to resist," he murmured into the night, his voice carried away by the wind, but lingering in her dreams like a shadow she could not escape. The night passed, quiet but charged with the promise of storms to come. And in the heart of Eldrith, beneath the veil of ordinary life, a prophecy began to stir, awakening ancient forces that had slumbered for centuries. Forces that would test courage, love, and the bonds of the soul itself. Alara knew one thing with a certainty that surprised her: her life would never be the same. And she could not decide if that thought terrified her or thrilled her. Alara could not stop thinking about Kale. The memory of his dark eyes, the sharp edge of jealousy in his voice, and the strange pull she felt toward him haunted her every step. The village of Eldrith felt smaller now, quieter, and she found herself gazing often toward the northern forests, wondering what secrets they held. Days passed in a rhythm of tending the sick and preparing herbs, yet her heart was restless. Something inside her stirred, an echo of the prophecy she had long ignored. "The blood of the unclaimed shall bind the Wolf King's heart," she whispered to herself, the words tasting strange on her tongue. Could it truly mean her? She had never thought of herself as special. The first time Kale returned, he came as silently as a shadow, his presence felt before he was seen. He stood at the edge of the village, the twilight catching the sharp lines of his face, making him look almost otherworldly. Alara noticed the way the villagers instinctively avoided him, bowing their heads in fear and awe. "I did not think you would come again so soon," Alara said, keeping her voice calm, though her heart pounded. "I did not intend to return," Kale replied, his gaze fixed on her. "Yet fate is not always content to wait." He stepped closer, the air around him thick with unspoken power. Alara's instincts screamed at her to step back, but another part, a deeper, quieter part, urged her to stay. She could feel the tension building like the charge before a storm. "I need you to come with me," he said abruptly. "There are truths you must see for yourself, and dangers that you cannot face alone." "Why me?" she asked, surprised. "I am only a healer." Kale's eyes softened, though the shadows in them never left. "You are more than you know," he said, "and more than you suspect." She hesitated, her mind torn between fear and curiosity. But there was something in the way he looked at her, a sincerity and vulnerability that contrasted sharply with the stories she had heard about him. With a deep breath, she nodded. "I will go." The journey to Kale's kingdom was unlike anything she had imagined. The northern forests were dense and dark, with trees so tall that sunlight barely touched the forest floor. Strange whispers seemed to float on the wind, and the howl of wolves echoed through the trees. Despite the eeriness, Alara felt an inexplicable sense of belonging, as if the forest recognized her, or perhaps was testing her. Kale remained close but silent, his presence a constant reminder of both protection and tension. She could feel the strength in him, but also the weight of centuries he carried, the burdens of a king cursed by fate, feared by all, and alone despite his power. At dusk, they reached the gates of Kale's castle, a massive fortress carved into cliffs of black stone. The walls glimmered faintly under the setting sun, as if they were alive. Gargoyles perched along the edges, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. The castle exuded power and danger, and Alara's heart raced at the thought of stepping inside. "Do not be afraid," Kale said, reading her hesitation. "This place may seem dark, but it holds the truth you must see, and it will test you." The gates opened silently, and the shadows swallowed them. The interior was vast and grand, filled with corridors that twisted like the branches of an ancient tree. Statues of past kings and queens lined the halls, their eyes eerily lifelike. Candles flickered along the walls, casting moving shadows that made the space feel alive. Alara noticed how Kale moved with ease through the corridors, like a predator in his domain. He was both intimidating and mesmerizing, his presence filling every corner of the castle. "You are not used to power like this," he said, breaking the silence. "Few are." "I have never needed it," she replied. "I only want to help people." Kale studied her carefully. "Help can take many forms, you will see that soon." Over the following days, Alara began to explore the castle under Kale's watchful eye. She saw treasures and relics of ancient magic, books that seemed to hum with power, and rooms filled with shadows that moved almost like living creatures. She could feel the tension between them growing stronger with every passing moment. Kale's attention was relentless, yet his approach was both protective and challenging. One evening, they walked along a balcony overlooking the cliffs. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the forest below. "Why do you watch me so closely?" Alara asked, unable to hide the curiosity and frustration in her voice. Kale's gaze did not leave hers. "Because you are dangerous to me," he said simply. "Not in the way you think. You awaken something I have tried to bury for centuries." "And that makes me restless," Alara frowned. "Awaken what?" "The part of me that has been alone too long," Kale admitted. "The part that desires a connection I have been denied, a bond I thought I would never feel." The words hit her with unexpected force. She had expected arrogance or cruelty, but instead she heard vulnerability. His jealousy, his intensity, the way he sometimes seemed to struggle against his own emotions, it all made sense now. He was not merely a king. He was a man trapped by his own power and history. They stood in silence, the wind carrying their words away. For a moment the world felt suspended, as if the castle itself held its breath. The next challenge came sooner than either expected. A messenger arrived, pale and trembling, with news of a rival faction gathering on the outskirts of Kale's territory. They sought to overthrow him, believing that a king ruled by shadows could not protect his lands. Kale's expression darkened, the shadow of jealousy and possessiveness sharpening in his gaze. "You must stay close," he said to Alara. "This is dangerous." "I can protect myself," she said firmly. "I know," Kale replied, "but I cannot allow you to be harmed, not by them, not by anything." The night that followed was tense. They moved through the forest together, Kale alert and silent, his senses sharp as a wolf's. Alara followed, relying on her instincts and growing courage. She noticed how Kale's attention never left her, how every movement, every glance was charged with a mix of command and concern. They reached a clearing under the full moon when the ambush occurred. Shadows shifted in the trees and figures emerged with weapons drawn. Kale's aura changed instantly, radiating authority and danger. "Stay behind me," he commanded. Alara hesitated but obeyed. She watched as Kale moved with precision, his power both mesmerizing and terrifying. He defended them with controlled strength, his movements fluid, almost like a dance. But then, a dagger meant for him flew toward them, and Alara acted instinctively. Her hands glowed faintly, and a shield of energy burst around them. The dagger shattered against it, and the attackers retreated, unnerved by the display. Kale stared at her, eyes wide, his chest heaving. You saved me," he whispered, his voice trembling with something she could not name. "I could not let you be hurt," Alara said simply, though her own heart raced. Kale took a step closer, his gaze piercing. "You are mine," he said, his voice low, almost a growl, "whether you wish it or not." Alara felt a shiver run through her. His words were not possessive in a cruel way, they were raw, honest, and desperate. And yet they carried a warning, a promise, and a threat all at once. The forest was silent afterward, the threat gone but the tension lingering. They stood under the moonlight, not speaking, each lost in thought. Alara realized she had never felt anything like this before, fear and fascination intertwined. A pull toward someone so powerful yet vulnerable, so dangerous yet protective. Kale broke the silence finally. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met," he said softly, "and that frightens me, makes me want to guard you, challenge you, and keep you close." Alara looked at him, her own feelings a storm she could not name. "And she began, then stopped. How could she explain the pull she felt toward him, the attraction, the curiosity, the fear? "I do not know what I feel," she admitted. Kale nodded as if he understood perfectly. "Then perhaps we are alike," he said. "Both bound by forces we cannot fully control, yet drawn to each other despite it." The night stretched around them, filled with unspoken words and shared glances. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and the sound seemed to echo their emotions, wild, untamed, and full of longing. The forest of Eldrith was darker than usual that night. The trees twisted toward the sky like skeletal hands, and the wind carried whispers that seemed to reach directly into Alara's mind. Each step she took on the soft moss felt heavy, as if the earth itself wanted to warn her. Kale walked beside her, silent and alert, his eyes scanning the shadows as though expecting something to emerge from them at any moment. "You must understand," Kale said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was low but firm. "The dangers you have seen so far are only a fraction of what lies ahead." Alara glanced at him. The moonlight glinted off his dark hair, and she caught the sharp angles of his face, the intensity in his eyes. "I've seen danger before," she said, "but this feels different." Kale's jaw tightened. "It is. The darkness here is ancient. It knows who you are and it knows your potential. It will try to test you, to twist what you feel." Alara shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. They moved deeper into the forest, where the shadows seemed to gather like living creatures. Every step felt as if they were being watched, measured, judged. Finally, they reached a clearing where the trees formed a circle around a stone altar. Strange symbols were carved into the surface, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Kale stopped at the edge of the clearing and turned to her. "This is where it begins," he said, "where you will see the truth about me, about the curse that binds my soul." Alara's heart quickened. "A curse?" she asked. "What do you mean?" Kale's expression darkened. He stepped closer to the altar, his hands brushing over the carvings as if reading an invisible text. "Centuries ago," he began, "a sorceress, one who I thought was a friend, cursed my line. She swore that no mate could claim my heart without facing grave danger, that no bond I formed could be free of pain." Alara listened, fear and fascination mixing in her chest. "And this affects you?" Kale nodded, his eyes distant. "I have lived under it my entire life. I have loved from afar, ruled with caution, and kept the kingdom together while my heart remained empty. Until you." The air between them grew charged, thick with tension. Alara felt a pull toward him, stronger than ever, yet tinged with fear. She had seen glimpses of his power, had felt his protectiveness, but the knowledge of the curse added a new weight to her feelings. "You are the first to awaken something in me that I thought I had lost forever," Kale said, his voice soft but intense. "And that terrifies me. I do not want to harm you, yet I fear I might, simply because of what I am." Alara reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Kale, I am not afraid of you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I am afraid of the curse, yes, but not you. I want to help you. We can face this together." Kale's gaze softened, but the shadows never left his eyes. "Together," he whispered, and for a moment the darkness around them seemed to pause, acknowledging their bond. The night grew colder as they began the journey through the cursed forest. Twisted roots and thick underbrush slowed their progress, and strange noises echoed from every direction. Alara could sense the presence of spirits, echoes of the past, watching them. She held her hands before her, trying to summon a protective barrier with the magic she had felt awaken during the ambush. Kale stayed close, guiding her through the forest, his body a shield against unseen threats. "Do not let fear rule you," he said. "The curse feeds on doubt, on hesitation. You must trust yourself and trust me." Alara nodded, forcing herself to focus. Every step was a battle against panic and the unknown. The forest seemed alive, its shadows reaching for them like fingers. Strange whispers echoed around them, voices from the past that taunted and warned. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a wolf with fur black as night and eyes glowing like fire. It circled them slowly, growling low in its throat. Alara's heart leapt. She knew this was no ordinary wolf. Kale stepped in front of her, his body radiating power. "It is a test," he said. "Do not falter." Alara's hands glowed as she lifted her barrier, feeling energy surge through her. The wolf lunged, but the barrier held. Kale moved beside her, his hand brushing against hers. They worked together, their magic intertwining, pushing the creature back until it retreated into the shadows. Breathing heavily, Alara looked at him. "Is this part of the curse?" Kale nodded. "Yes. The curse sends guardians, illusions, tests, to ensure no mate comes close without fear. If you fail, the consequences are severe." Alara swallowed, her resolve strengthening. "Then I will not fail." Kale's eyes softened, admiration and something deeper in them. "I know you won't. That is why I trust you." Hours passed as they moved through the forest. Each trial tested Alara's courage and strength, and Kale's patience and restraint. There were moments when his jealousy flared, subtle but sharp, when he saw shadows or sensed danger near her. Yet there were also moments of tenderness, where his protectiveness became a silent promise. At one point, they reached a river that glimmered under the moonlight. The water was cold and dark, and across it lay another section of the cursed forest. Kale hesitated, then turned to her. "This is the final test," he said. "Crossing this river will bring you closer to the heart of the curse. You will see truths about me, about myself, that cannot be unseen." Alara took a deep breath. "I am ready." Kale placed a hand over hers, their fingers brushing. The contact sent a shiver through her, and she noticed the way he lingered, as if he wanted to keep her close forever. "Stay close," he whispered. They stepped into the river, the cold water biting their skin. Shadows danced across the surface, twisting into forms that resembled faces from Kale's past. Alara held tightly to his hand, drawing courage from his presence. Suddenly, a spectral blade shot toward them, faster than she could react. Kale moved to intercept it, but Alara's instincts surged. Her hands glowed with energy, and she summoned a protective shield that caught the blade, shattering it into shards of light. Kale stared at her, astonishment and relief mixing in his expression. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice trembling. You could have been harmed." Alara shook her head. "We are stronger together. I would never let anything happen to you." For a moment, time seemed to stop. They looked into each other's eyes, the pull between them undeniable. Kale's jealousy, his desire, his fear, all of it mixed into a storm that made Alara's heart race. "You are mine," Kale said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not in a way that will hurt you, but in a way that binds us together." Alara's chest tightened. The words were not threatening. They were honest, vulnerable, and filled with a strange beauty. She realized that their bond was no longer just physical or magical. It was something deeper, something that connected their souls. The night stretched on as they moved deeper into the forest. They faced illusions of betrayal, shadows that whispered lies, and spirits that tried to draw them apart. Each challenge strengthened their trust, forcing them to rely on each other completely. At the heart of the cursed forest, they finally reached a glade bathed in silver light. A single tree stood in the center, its branches twisting toward the sky like a crown. Kale approached it, placing a hand on the bark. "This tree marks the center of the curse," he said. "Here we will confront it fully. Whatever happens next will change us forever." Alara stepped forward, her hands glowing with energy. "Then let it happen," she said, her voice steady. "I am ready." The shadows around them began to swirl, forming shapes and figures that whispered warnings and threats. Kale's hand brushed hers again, and they stepped together into the heart of the curse. The forest seemed to pulse, alive with ancient magic. Alara felt it testing her courage, probing her fears. Kale's presence was a steady anchor, reminding her that she was not alone. Suddenly, a shadow lunged toward Kale, a spectral blade aimed at his chest. Alara reacted instinctively, summoning a shield that collided with the blade. Light exploded across the glade, sending the shadow flying backward. Kale's eyes widened, his breath catching. You risked yourself for me," he said, awe and something deeper in his voice. "I could not let you be harmed," Alara replied, her heart pounding. I care for you, Kale." For the first time, Kale's mask of control and fear cracked completely. He reached for her, his hands trembling slightly, and pulled her close. "And I care for you, Alara. More than I have ever cared for anyone." The curse pulsed around them, testing them one final time. And in that moment they understood. Their bond was stronger than the darkness, stronger than the centuries of pain. Together, they could face anything. The sky above the mountain was painted in deep shades of violet and gold as the first light of dawn brushed the peaks. Alara stood at the base of the staircase that led to the Cathedral of Stars, her heart pounding in her chest. The journey from the cursed forest had been long and perilous. She and Kale had faced illusions, shadows, and tests that pushed their courage, strength, and trust to the limits. But now they were closer than ever to confronting the curse that had haunted Kale's soul for centuries. Kale's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a silent anchor. "Are you ready?" he asked, his dark eyes reflecting both concern and something softer, something vulnerable. Alara met his gaze and nodded. "I am," she said. "I've faced the curse before, Kale. I've learned to trust, and I trust you." He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, but the tension in his shoulders did not fade. "This is more than the curse," he murmured. "This place, it tests everything about us. Our courage, our bond, our hearts. Be prepared for anything." The staircase wound upward like a spiral carved into the mountainside, glowing faintly with starlight. Every step seemed heavier than the last, as if the mountain itself weighed on them, measuring their resolve. They walked in silence, feeling the weight of the ancient magic that surrounded them. Finally, they reached the entrance to the cathedral. Its doors were immense, carved from stone and etched with intricate symbols that pulsed faintly in the early light. Kale placed a hand on the surface, whispering an incantation in a language Alara did not understand. Slowly the doors opened, revealing the vast interior, a sanctuary of light and shadow, where stars seemed to hang from the ceiling like frozen fire. Alara stepped inside, awestruck. The cathedral seemed alive, the air vibrating with power. Shadows moved along the walls, forming patterns that felt both beautiful and ominous. Kale followed, his eyes scanning every corner. "We are not alone here," he said. As they moved deeper, the shadows coalesced into forms, ancient spirits, guardians of the curse, tasked with testing any who dared challenge it. Alara felt her heart tighten, but Kale's hand brushed hers, steadying her. "Together," he whispered, "always together." The first trial was immediate. A shadow rose before them, taking the form of Kale's long-lost mentor, the one who had tried to guide him through the curse centuries ago. Its voice was cold, echoing in the cathedral. "Alpha King," it intoned. "You have broken rules older than you can comprehend. You cannot claim a mate without consequences, and mortal life is not meant to bear the weight of your power." Kale stepped forward, his hand gripping Alara's. "I do not fear the past," he said. "And she is not a mortal to be ignored. She is my equal. We face this together." The shadow's eyes glowed and the cathedral trembled. A wave of energy pushed them back, testing their resolve. Alara felt a flicker of fear, but Kale's presence reminded her of the bond they had forged in the cursed forest. She raised her hands, calling forth her energy, and the light from her magic intertwined with Kale's power. Together, they pushed against the shadow. Their combined strength formed a protective glow around them, and the shadow's form began to waver. Kale's voice rang clear, commanding and steady. "You will not harm her. You will not harm us." The shadow let out a final, echoing cry before dissolving into the air. Alara gasped for breath, looking at Kale. "We did it," she whispered. Kale shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "Only the first step," he said. "The curse still holds its heart." They moved further into the cathedral, reaching the central chamber. In the center stood a crystal pedestal, glowing with light that seemed both welcoming and terrifying. Alara approached it, feeling the weight of the magic. Kale's hand rested on her back, guiding her. "This is the core of the curse," Kale said softly. "It tests the heart. Only by willingly offering yourself to it with trust and courage can the curse be broken." Alara swallowed hard. "You mean I have to risk myself?" "Yes," Kale replied, "but not blindly. I will be with you every step of the way." She took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing her hands on the crystal. Immediately, visions flashed before her eyes, Kale's past, the centuries of loneliness, the battles he had fought, the pain of the curse, and the moments where he had longed for connection. She felt the weight of his sorrow, the loneliness that had defined him, and something stirred deep within her own heart, a desire to heal, to comfort, to bind her fate with his. Kale joined her, placing his hands over hers. "Together," he whispered, "our hearts, our souls. One against the curse." The crystal pulsed, testing them. Shadows formed, twisting into shapes of their fears. Alara losing Kale, Kale failing her, the world collapsing around them. The pressure was immense, but their hands remained joined, their bond unbroken. "Do not let fear rule you," Kale said. "We are stronger than this." Alara closed her eyes, focusing on him, on the trust and love they shared. She let go of doubt, fear, and hesitation. The crystal glowed brighter, absorbing their courage, their unity, and their willingness to face the curse together. The shadows shrieked and lashed out, but their combined light grew stronger. Kale's energy, tempered by centuries of restraint, and Alara's nascent power, fueled by courage and compassion, intertwined in a radiant dance. Slowly the shadows dissipated, and the crystal shone with pure, steady light. Kale exhaled, his hand still holding hers. "It is done," he whispered. "The curse, it has lost its grip." Alara opened her eyes, relief and awe flooding her. We did it," she said. Kale pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "Yes," he murmured. "Together." The cathedral seemed to breathe with them, the shadows gone, replaced by a sense of peace and renewal. Stars above twinkled brighter, and the magic that had weighed on Kale's soul for centuries finally seemed lighter, freer. Alara looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "You're free," she said softly. Kale smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. "No," he said, shaking his head. "We are free, because I could not have been without you. You were my courage, my anchor, my heart." For a moment they simply held each other, letting the stillness of the cathedral surround them. The bond they had forged in trials, fear, and trust was now unbreakable. The Alpha King and the healer, once strangers bound by prophecy, now shared a fate stronger than any curse. As they prepared to leave, a gentle wind swept through the cathedral, carrying whispers that sounded almost like applause. The ancient spirits that had guarded the curse now seemed to bow in acknowledgement. Kale and Alara stepped out into the early morning light, the world outside bathed in colors that felt more vivid, more alive than ever before. Kale took her hand, his thumb brushing over hers. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The world beyond the forest still holds dangers, but together we can face them all." Alara nodded, a smile touching her lips. "Together," she repeated. The kingdom below awaited them, a land still shadowed by past fears but now lit with hope. They descended the mountain, their steps confident, their hearts intertwined. The Alpha King and his mate, no longer bound by curse, no longer alone, were ready to face whatever the future held.